Sophos Endpoint delivers unparalleled ransomware protection powered by our unique CryptoGuard technology that detects and stops ransomware in its tracks. But unlike other endpoint solutions, our universal approach protects against ransomware running both locally on a device and remote ransomware attacks. Now, remote ransomware presents a huge opportunity for you to win new endpoint deals and retain existing customers that may be thinking about switching to an alternative vendor. Plus, it's a good way to introduce network detection and response too. Here's a quick introduction to remote ransomware and how our unique approach will enable you to sell against competitive solutions. So what is remote ransomware? Remote ransomware is where a compromised endpoint is used to encrypt data on other devices on the same network. It's a major threat. Attackers will directly encrypt on a device if they can. However, high quality endpoint security means that many machines are generally well protected from ransomware processes that are running locally on the device. But if they find a way to compromise one device on the network, they can use remote ransomware to encrypt other devices on the same network, even if those devices are running next-gen endpoint protection. Let's take a look at how this works. In this example, we have a number of devices connected on a network. There's one weak spot, that's the device shown in red on the left. The rest are protected by a non-Sophos next-gen endpoint security product from another leading provider. Now that could be Microsoft, it could be CrowdStrike, it could be SentinelOne, or it could be others. Adversaries start by compromising this weak spot device. In 80% of cases, this could be an unmanaged device, but it could also be an unprotected or underprotected machine that lacks the defenses needed to stop attackers getting onto that device. Next, they identify targeted devices that they want to encrypt on the same network, leveraging the organization's domain architecture. They then run their malicious ransomware process on the compromised device, which encrypts data on the protected device or devices. And then they can hold the victim hostage and demand a ransom payment. Now, most endpoint security products are ineffective in this scenario because they focus on detecting malicious ransomware processes on the protected device. However, with a remote ransomware attack, the process is run on the compromised machine, enabling adversaries to bypass the defenses on the victim's device. That means that just one weak spot device can expose an organization's entire estate to malicious encryption. So just how big of a problem is this? According to a recent Microsoft Digital Defense report, around 60% of human-operated ransomware attacks now involve malicious remote encryption. That's huge, and our own product telemetry backs this up, with a significant proportion of CryptoGuard alerts involving remote encryption. And what's more, adversaries are not limited in their choice of ransomware variant for remote attacks. A wide range of well-known ransomware families all support remote encryption. And again, another significant reason behind this prevalence of remote ransomware is again because most endpoint security products are ineffective in protecting organizations against this type of attack. Fortunately, the CryptoGuard capability in Sophos Endpoint provides industry-first universal ransomware protection that defends organizations from both local and remote encryption. Now, unlike other endpoint solutions, again, that solely focus on looking for malicious processes, CryptoGuard analyzes file contents for signs of malicious encryption, irrespective of where the ransomware processes are running. This makes it highly effective at stopping ransomware, including remote encryption attacks. And if it does detect remote encryption, CryptoGuard automatically blocks the activity and rolls back files to their unencrypted state. So let's walk through the scenario again, and this time with Sophos Endpoint running on the protected devices. Now, as before, there's one weak spot device, that red device on the left-hand side, which could be an unmanaged device on the network. And as before, they start by compromising that weak spot device. Next, they identify the protected devices on the same network that they want to encrypt. They'll run their malicious ransomware process on the compromised device. But this time, Sophos CryptoGuard kicks in on the protected device and uses its mathematical analysis to detect malicious encryption independent of where that process is running, so it can detect ransomware encryption attempts even when the malicious process is not running on the victim's device. At which point it stops and rolls back the malicious encryption, returning files to their unencrypted state. And then, to prevent adversaries from continuing to abuse the compromised device, it automatically blocks its IP address. Now, whilst we're mainly talking about sophos endpoint here, there's a great opportunity to also bring sophos NDR, or network detection and response, into the conversation with your customers and prospects. Now, as we've discussed, a single unprotected endpoint can leave an organization vulnerable to a remote ransomware attack. In fact, 80% of remote ransomware compromises originate from an unmanaged device. So how can organizations identify if they've got unprotected or unmanaged devices in their network in the first place? And that's where sophos NDR can help. Sophos NDR monitors network traffic for suspicious flows, and in doing so, identifies unprotected devices and rogue assets in the environment. So you can use this opportunity to demonstrate the importance of seeing what's on your network and introduce our NDR solution, which is now available for both Sophos MDR and Sophos XDR customers. So for the strongest protection against remote ransomware attacks, organizations should install Sophos Endpoint on all of their devices within the environment, and also deploy Sophos NDR to discover unprotected devices on their network. So let's take a look at the overall opportunity here. Firstly, unless the customer is already using Sophos Endpoint with CryptoGuard, there's a high chance that they're at risk from remote ransomware attacks. The technique is prevalent, many ransomware families support it, and there are gaps in protection defenses. So most other endpoint protection solutions are unable to protect against these remote ransomware attacks, and that includes Microsoft Defender, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Trend Micro, and others. So this is a huge advantage for Sophos Endpoint. Our approach is unique, so use this to your advantage when you're having conversations with customers about endpoint protection. It's also really easy for customers to use. CryptoGuard is a unique capability of Sophos Endpoint, and it's included with all InterceptX Advanced, XDR, and MDR subscriptions. And what's more, it's enabled automatically by default, ensuring organizations enjoy full protection from both local and remote ransomware attacks straight away, with no fine-tuning or configuration required. Let's now look at how you can use our remote ransomware protection in different sales scenarios, starting with defending the endpoint. Now, over 250,000 organizations use Sophos Endpoint today, and we want to keep them as customers, while we know that other vendors are trying to displace us. Plus, we face the challenge of organizations moving to Microsoft Defender for purely budgetary reasons. Let's talk through a few likely conversations you'll have and how you can use remote ransomware protection to your advantage. So customers are going to say to you, we're thinking about moving to vendor X. Maybe that's Microsoft Defender, maybe that's CrowdStrike, maybe that's SentinelOne, maybe that's Trend Micro. To that, you can respond that this particular vendor lacks the deep defenses of Sophos Endpoint, falling short when it comes to stopping malicious remote encryption, which now accounts for around 60% of human-led ransomware attacks. So ask the customer, how much of a concern is ransomware to them? And you should get a positive response from that question. Now, the customer may say that the vendor that they're looking at moving to say that they can stop ransomware in other ways. And here's where you have to talk about the difference between locally running ransomware and remote ransomware. So with a remote ransomware attack, a single unprotected device can encrypt an entire network that's running that vendor's protection. So ask the customer, how confident are they that they don't have weak spot devices within their environment? So remember to point out that CryptoGuard in Sophos Endpoint protects against both local and remote ransomware, and is one of a series of protections against ransomware in the Sophos Endpoint technology stack. You'll also hear customers that are thinking about moving to Microsoft Defender saying that their finance department saying that they need to move to Defender in order to save money based on Microsoft licensing costs. So here's where you turn the conversation into the overall cost in the event of a ransomware attack. The average cost to remediate a remote ransomware attack runs in the millions. Strong security is a small investment in comparison. So ask the customer, can they afford to take that risk? We want to retain and upsell our existing customers, but we also want to win new customers. Organizations need protection against remote ransomware attacks, and unlike most other endpoint protection vendors, Sophos can provide this for them. Use remote ransomware as the hook for new business conversations. Use that statistic from Microsoft. 60% of today's human-led ransomware attacks involve remote ransomware. That's huge. Couple that with the fact that most endpoint security solutions likely can't stop remote encryption. Ask the customer, how much of a concern is that for them? Make it clear to the customer that with Sophos Endpoint, they enjoy the peace of mind and business continuity that comes from having protection against both local and remote ransomware attacks, Ask them for the opportunity to talk to them about it. Use the slides in this presentation to talk through that scenario of remote ransomware attack. And once again, reinforce that with remote ransomware, a single unprotected device could encrypt files across the entire network, running other vendors' endpoint protection solutions. So how confident is the customer they don't have any weak spot devices? And as I mentioned earlier, you can use this as an opportunity to bring in network detection and response into your conversation. So while sophos endpoint stops the attack, they may also want to make sure they don't have weak spot devices that may leave them exposed. What visibility do they have into the devices in their network? Great opportunity to bring network detection and response as an upsell to XDR and MDR into your conversation. To help you take full advantage of this unique opportunity, we've created a range of new resources that you can use with your customers and prospects. For example, we've created a promotional video which summarizes remote ransomware and the unique differentiated protection that CryptoGuard provides in sophos endpoint. There's an expert explainer video featuring our very own Peter McKenzie, our Director of Incident Response, talking about remote encryption as a threat vector and how sophos technology provides robust defense against remote ransomware. We've also published an article on the Sophos News blog that you can share with customers and prospects. And there are some new PowerPoint slides that you've seen in this session that you can incorporate into your own presentations. So remote ransomware protection presents a significant and unique opportunity to go out and sell sophos endpoint against the majority of other endpoint vendors in the market. Start taking advantage of this huge opportunity today.